to Commissioner Gentiloni. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Honourable members, we all know that this crisis in 8 months changed our world. We will measure its economic impact for EU with our autumn forecast in a couple of weeks. The last forecast released a few hours ago by IMF states that the negative growth for the euro area will be in 2020 of minus 8.3. Just to compare, we had a negative growth of minus 4.1 in 2009, so during the financial crisis. It was less than half the crisis that we could have according to this forecast in 2020. The social consequences will be deep and leave scars. Poverty increase, according to the World Bank, will be in the world around 120, 140 million. And this could put at risk the efforts to eradicate poverty that were done in the last 30 years. And the social consequences will be deep also in our union, well beyond the numbers of increased unemployment rates, because we know that yes, we have an increase of unemployment rates, but we have increasing gender gap, we have difficult situation for precarious jobs and for children less educated. So we have deep consequences, all in all. This unprecedented crisis triggered unprecedented reaction, and several measures, as you know, were taken by the Union, beginning with the first decision in March of having much more flexible rules, both on the fiscal and on state aid, and then easing the use of remaining cohesion funds, and then the decisions of several loans, including the SURE package in support of short work schemes, and then the big decision of Next Generation EU that the Commission proposed at the end of May and the Council adopted at the end of July and is now under discussion with the Parliament. So, and these common tools are on top of national responses. I think we should be very well aware of this. And on average, these national responses amount around 4.5% of GDP in the Union, and together member states' reaction and common reaction makes our stimulus packages comparable and in some cases even stronger to those of other global players. But uncertainty is still there. It is not decreasing. It is maybe growing uncertainty in the last weeks. For sure, we will not have a so-called V-shaped recovery. We will have to coexist with the virus for a certain amount of time, and we have to be very clear in the effort to avoid a double-dip recession, keeping supportive fiscal stance and confirming, as we did as Commission, our general escape clause for next year. So now at stake is the implementation and the quality of our decisions. As far as the RRF is concerned, we have to find the right balance between the national ownership, which is fundamental in this initiative. We are not writing memorandum here in Brussels for these plans, and the common priorities and the country-specific recommendation. The balance will be key if we want to have a good result with this recovery and resilience facility. Our goal in general and in conclusion is to transform our economy in this terrible and difficult crisis. As always happens with crises, should we be able to have a more sustainable, more competitive, more resilient, should we be able to mitigate the social consequences of this crisis and to strengthen the social pillar of our economy, I think that the Commission and this Parliament have not an easy task. It is an enormous responsibility, but it is also the unique opportunity to contribute to better economies and better societies in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now on behalf of the EPP, José Manuel Fernández, go ahead, 2 minutes.
Nieobecny. Grupa Postępowego Sojuszu Socjalistów.
And now on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats in the Parliament, Helen Fritzon, 2 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. Let me start by thanking the Commissioner Gentiloni for his introduction. COVID-19 has made both a huge social economic impact on all of us. Different member states have been impacted both in the EU and outside, but quite a lot of work remains, especially now as the pandemic has been increasing and has become worse in many places. As a social democrat, I think it's important that recovery is based on measures which include everyone, regardless of your background. And I think these solutions have to be focused on the future. We have to build a new green economy. We can't go back to our old economy. We have to strengthen social Europe. We have an imbalance between the potential for people to achieve a good life within the EU and among member states as well. We know that equality provides greater benefits for social benefit, health, and the economy. So we have everything to win that we have common ambitions. Therefore, just as the Commissioner has just said, we have to raise our ambitions in our work with the social pillars. We need a more equal Europe. And that's why we have to take the advantage of the possibilities within the single market. We have to increase our investments. We have to have a clear transition to a digital society and a clear position towards climate change. We need a new long-term strategic agenda within the EU with concrete objectives and measures. And by doing so, we can increase our ambitions and we can strengthen our potential for a more equal EU. We'll all benefit from this, and above all, our citizens will benefit from this.
Thank you very much. And now, on behalf of the Renew Europe group, Sylvie Brune, 2 minutes.
Madam President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, I'm very happy to be able to speak from Marseille, and I wanted to stress that faced with this unprecedented health crisis, the Union reacted rapidly. From the outset and within its mandate, it tried to control the economic and social consequences of COVID-19, first by adopting urgent instruments like SURE, supporting partial unemployment measures, and then REACT EU, and then the aid to the most deprived. And then the European Union presented important tools for recovery. So Europe is there. I would call for the recovery plan to have a strong green and social component, and that it should have ambitious environmental and social goals, because I am convinced that we can have no recovery and we will not be able to get out of the crisis unless we ensure we have social measures. And I say this because some people don't seem to get this point, that social issues are horizontal, social issues are cross-cutting issues. Let me just say that part of the REACT EU resources should actually go to fighting precariousness and severe poverty. We already have the FEAD and the ESF Plus to do that. Then we also need new own resources and an ambitious multi-annual budget with an ESF Plus which actually meets our requirements. Then we need investment in digital and green transitions with money for training and reskilling, particularly for young people, using the Just Transition Fund, the Youth Guarantee, amongst others. And then we also need to look at certain shortcomings we have in Europe. We need to shore up the health aspect of Europe, but we also need to act in the social field to ensure fair minimum wages in each country of the EU and to guarantee better working conditions and better social rights for platform workers. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, pani poseł, w imieniu grupy.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the ID, now the floor goes to Mr. Jörg Meuthen for 2 minutes.
Frau Präsidentin, verehrte Kollegen.
President, colleagues, today we're talking about the possibility for the EU to mitigate the social and economic consequences of the COVID crisis. This might be seen as vanity, but I think the key question here is, why should these tasks be carried out by the EU? The social and economic consequences of the COVID crisis are very different in different member states. In addition, and more importantly, social policy is not in the remit of the EU. It's a national state competence, and that's where it should be. Every member state should and can find its own response to the COVID crisis. What's being done here is something very different. It is clearly impinging on national sovereignties. You're setting yourselves up as rescuers so that you can ask for more funds and increase your own power. What you're trying to do is establish the EU as a state, and you're using the COVID crisis to achieve that. But this crisis could and should be solved within member states themselves. If member states take appropriate solutions, that would be a good thing. Competition and the appropriate solutions are a better strategy than centralising these kinds of decisions. We've got this giant 750 million euro rescue fund, but we haven't actually heard anything about what's actually going to be done with all that money, those 750 billion. Is this going to fund reconstruction? I mean, that seems to be the idea, but this isn't part of your remit and doesn't even seem to be anything that's necessary. You're basically writing a new chapter in the downfall of your own power. Let me once again say, social policy is not a task of the EU, it's part of national states' remits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, on behalf of the Greens, Monika Vana, 2 minutes, and please, I ask you to stick to your speaking time. Thank you.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, I do welcome this possibility of being able to speak to you directly from Vienna, directly into the plenary. Now, in Europe, we have 200,000 who've died of corona. 5 million people have had cases of corona, and 15 million people have lost their job. Our citizens are looking to us, at the European institutions, to see how we react to this crisis, because we have a plural crisis. We have a social crisis and a climate crisis, as well as the economic crisis. The European Parliament in recent months has repeatedly made clear that there are large European majorities for a more social Europe, a Europe in which the costs of the crisis can be shared in solidarity and where we can support one another. We have to invest our way out of this crisis, and in this focus of our measures, we should be focusing on the victims of the crisis and those people who have borne us through the crisis, for example, women. We urgently need a European care deal. We need massive investments in healthcare, in care sector, and in the public services. That is what this crisis has demonstrated. And when we see increasing poverty, if we wish to fight it, then we very quickly have to have a social political offensive against it. And this has to be done via short-term measures. For example, this has got to go beyond just short-term work. For example, the European unemployment benefit reinsurance, a European minimum wage, or an initiative to ensure a minimum income. I welcome expressly the agreement of the Council on a framework for the unemployment benefit and minimum income, and we hope to see a proposal very soon. This crisis means that we have to set an agenda for more green jobs, and I think everyone together wants to use this COVID crisis to increase European integration and rebuild our economies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the ECR group, the floor goes to Mrs. Szydło for 1.5 minutes. Madam President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, solidarity first, solidarity second, and solidarity third. I think this is the word of the day for everything that we undertake in all these ambitious projects and goals that we set ourselves, both for the healthcare for Europeans, creating jobs and protecting them, and supporting the European economy. The measures that had already been taken are positive. For example, the European Recovery Instrument, which is a very important support for Europeans. However, we have to continue working on implementing projects and plans that do take into account the solidarity that I mentioned at the beginning. These measures and activities need to take into account the problems of individual states. For example, under the motto of climate transformation, we are speaking about reducing CO2 emissions by 60%. This, for example, goes against the economy of my country. So I think we may need to think about potentially developing certain forms of support that will have the aspect of solidarity for everyone in Europe in facing this very important challenge. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now on behalf of GUE, the floor goes to Madame Rego for 1.5 minutes.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. For years, as you know, Europe had a strong social economy that could count with anything, but we have now seen our weakness through the pandemic. Fortunately, we have managed to reach an agreement for the recovery fund, which hopefully will be fairly distributed to benefits that most need it. But unfortunately, we do have outbreaks still happening, and our industry is very affected. We're seeing relocations too, and companies that have in fact benefited from subsidies are still relocating. We've seen this in Spain with Alcoa, which is also laying off workers. But the crisis could be an opportunity to change things. The pandemic has shown that only public control guarantees public welfare. We need more public planning, and we also need to meet the challenges of the climate emergency and create green jobs. Commissioner, I would take this opportunity to ask that we do focus on the most important points and ensure that as we do come out of this crisis, we concentrate on sectors such as aerospace and concentrate on the human beings that are the genuine wealth of Europe and ensure European funds actually do provide quality jobs and a future for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the non-attached, Daniela Rondinelli, 1.5 minutes.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Commissioner Gentiloni, for your words today. Last July, we welcomed the recovery plan as a new start for Europe. But just a few months later, some member states are once again blocking negotiations on the budget. And this is a serious business, because it shows a major gap between them and our citizens and businesses. With every passing day, the billions of new generation EU look less impressive when compared with what's necessary to relaunch production and ensure jobs. Strategic programmes such as Horizon and the Social Fund risk cuts. Sure, will be a loan with conditionalities, but there's no clarity on those conditionalities. The Minimum Wage Directive, which was supposed to be launched in the first 100 days, has yet again been postponed. The Youth Guarantee, will not be the universal, binding and permanent measure on which so many young people would have been able to count. And finally, the review of the Stability and Growth Pact doesn't look as if it's happening. And a few hours ago, even the European Fiscal Board said that it was too late for it. We in the Five Star Movement were crucial a year ago to save the Commission, and the Italian government made a decisive contribution to changing things in Council. We believe that it's time to step up to the plate and do that immediately, because any delay only increases the economic and social damage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Adam Kosza for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, the current crisis caused by the global pandemic is the most serious for citizens and member states alike, because it is highly unpredictable and because it has not only presented us with economic and social challenges, but healthcare challenges as well. For every member state, the most important priority was to limit to the maximum the number of people losing their jobs due to the pandemic, or to provide transitional support for those who had become unemployed and then that they find another job fast. I would like to speak about what my country, Hungary, focuses on now. New investments and increasing existing capacities. While we are maintaining the jobs that currently exist, we need to do all we can in order to create new ones as well. The Hungarian government made it possible for employers and employees to agree on flexible working time. It intensified its controls of a healthy working environment at the workplace. It made working from home and teleworking obligatory, and it maintained financial support to keep workplaces and make up for lost income. In addition, there were 904 companies who applied for the competitiveness boosting program that was launched by the Hungarian government. These companies committed themselves to investments of more than 400 billion Hungarian forints, and as a result we managed to save 154,000 jobs. Traditional sources of support helped another 200,000 workers, which makes the total figure amount to 354,000 people. Because of its slow reaction and late action, the role of the European Union in the management of the COVID-19 crisis has become secondary in the eyes of citizens. The Union can only improve on this if next time it acts swiftly, efficiently, keeping the interests of member states in mind. You cannot work in place of the member states, only with them.
Thank you very much. And now, José Manuel Fernandes for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. The European Commission and the European Parliament were extremely quick in mobilizing the resources that we could make available as a part of the budget of the European Union. We've shown flexibility towards the member states in the use of these funds. We've given them the possibility to use these funds with a 100% co-financing rate. We've eliminated the kind of obstacles that used to exist for state aid. We've reinforced the civil mechanism, and we have given the European Commission authorization to actually spend money on 300 million doses of vaccines that will be made available to European citizens. We have acted very quickly. What has Council done? They have said that they want to reduce research. We need a vaccine. They've reduced research. They've reduced horizontal programs. We do need a European health program. What does Council do? It cuts the European health program's budget. What we need are strategic instruments, critical instruments for the European Union. What does Council do? It introduces cuts to financing in InvestEU, which makes it possible to actually have such strategic investments. We do talk about a geostrategic Europe, and we talk about an autonomous European Union, and yet Council makes cuts which would make it possible for us to shore up our industries so that we could produce medicines, an industry that could produce ventilators. And in conclusion, the recovery fund is urgent. In this House, in the Parliament, we adopted our opinion, making it possible for the European Commission to go on the markets. What does the Council do? It still hasn't made a decision, and hasn't since the 16th of September. Just what are they waiting for? It's vital that they actually take a decision so we can make progress on the recovery fund.
Thank you very much. And now Kostas Mavridis for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This coronavirus pandemic is an unprecedented situation that has hit all of the member states of the Union. Of course, that doesn't mean anything. We have to do something practically in order to counter it. We are now living the second wave of the pandemic that has an even greater social and financial impact on workers, on women, on children, on businesses, on education, on culture. All of these peoples and sectors need our support. However, there was a delay, but the EU came up with certain ambitious proposals in order to counter this pandemic. For example, we talked about an EU minimum wage as a way to protect the workers. But in order for those things to be effective, they have to be realized right away and without preconditions that will make them impossible. So that will actually mean that we can counter the social and economic impact of this unprecedented situation. And only in that way can we create social systems, and we also need to invest in public health. Now, there has been an attempt to use this in order to enforce some mini memoranda on the member states. This should be rejected. The role of the European Parliament in countering this pandemic should actually be greater, because we are the ones that represent the European citizens. Finally, dear Chair, we have seen one more thing. Pacta sunt servanda. What we have agreed to should actually be done. I mean, if we actually had this European guarantee, we would have a lot of tools enough.
Pan poseł Luis Garicano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garicano, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. There is consensus that we need individual freedoms and we need to try to limit the progress of the pandemic, but economists agree on that, and also the fact that governments need to actually spend a great deal of money now as a one-off to avoid the economy becoming worse than it is in such difficult times, which is why we now have the recovery fund of 750 million euros, so that all countries do have assistance in trying to ensure the recovery of their economies and for the future. That means governments do have a great deal of room for manoeuvre and have an opportunity, but the opportunity does have a downside with certain risks. What we don't want is for the governments to use European money to build up new elites, to build up possibilities to just remain in power. Such European money should not finance long, ongoing electoral campaigns, for example, of incumbents. It's very important, though, that we are negotiating the reconstruction mechanism and that we have clear and demanding rules that make it vital that the money be used for European funds, that we introduce controls so that the money is only used for what it should be, not for ongoing electoral campaigns. The prestige and future of the European Union also depend on this money being spent well. If we don't ensure that's the case, in 5 or 6 years, people will look back on this as a failed experiment, and we won't ever have the solidarity we want in Europe.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Peter Kofod for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Essentially, this debate is to ensure growth and employment in Europe in the wake of the COVID crisis. It's not my impression that the EU is acting in a positive fashion in the current situation. In Denmark, we have companies who cannot enjoy the government and aid packages because they haven't been approved. This is completely nuts. And what can the EU do about this? Let's have some answers. The EU can give our own countries permission to use our own money to help our own citizens and enterprises. That would be very helpful. It's my clear impression that EU is rather a problem rather than a benefit in our current crisis. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie pośle.
Thank you very much. And now François Alfonsi for 1 minute.
Oui, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, President. The economic and health crisis emerging from the COVID crisis is a long-term crisis. What we're seeing now shows that the consequences are going to last a long time and that the peak of the economic crisis is still to come. We also know that the health crisis, like the economic crisis, affects different areas in a very different manner. So let me talk about island regions, which are the most vulnerable vis-à-vis this crisis. They're vulnerable because tourism plays a major part in their economies, and also is because islands are very dependent on supply chains, which are now have been made very fragile as a result of the fall in tourism. Their sectors are the most affected, and there's going to be less trade as a result of the fall in tourism, and therefore more of an economic crisis. The EU needs to pay particular attention to the economic crisis in islands and needs specifically to act to relaunch their economies and make specific changes to state aid rules for islands' benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Joanna Kopczyńska for 1 minute.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Thank you, Madam President. In these difficult times of the pandemic, we should be showing solidarity with everyone who needs this solidarity and support. So this is why I support any measure that introduce more flexibility to the cohesion policy, so the CR and CR plus initiatives that have mobilized large funds for investments mitigating the effects of the pandemic by simplifying the procedures. This is an unprecedented measure due to the situation caused by the pandemic. However, we need more sustainable changes, like, for example, amendments to the Common Provisions regulations for the European funds, and we all should take the most simple measure to protect those who risk their lives fighting the virus. That is why I suggest to introduce social distancing, disinfecting and face masks everywhere. We should not make the work of medical staff more difficult. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Willumsen for 1 minute and a half.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What we need is a clear change of the EU's existing policy. We're in the middle of three significant crises: a global pandemic, which has seen millions of victims, an economic crisis, which means millions of people have lost their job, and a climate crisis. And that requires acute action if we don't have climate change completely out of control. We need an ambitious and a socially fair green transition. So we have to promote the economy by creating green jobs. We need to stop tax evasion so that we can have international companies contributing to the common good. And that means we have to stop the support to the agricultural policy and have green agricultural policy instead. And we also have to support the right for union organization and collective bargaining, and that so neither Luxembourg nor the Cayman Islands can escape a prohibition on tax havens. So we need handing action in the area of solidarity.
And now, Mr. Comín y Oliveres, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think the European Commission has a major responsibility to establish the most objective and clear criteria possible to help the states to decide which measures to adopt against COVID at every point in time. Unfortunately, it hasn't done this yet, even though we have requested this and did at the start of the pandemic. Criteria based on indicators and reliable scientific and clear data. Number of people who have been infected, unemployment rates, and on lockdowns, when should you close bars and restaurants? Do we need curfews? All of these are decisions which have serious consequences on people's health, people's lives, people's freedoms and the economy. And these decisions should not be politicized. They should not be the subject of a party political battle, which is what is happening in Spain. There, the management of COVID has become a political battlefield, followed by the rest of the countries of the European Union, scandalized. So the European Commission has a possibility to ensure this debate is run in a mature fashion, responsibly, and so does the government of Spain. Maybe the fact that in Spain the fact that we have such a fall in the economy is partly the reason for this. It's true that there's a great deal of our economy that is dependent on tourism, but that's the case for Italy too, and look at the differences. Some people learn from the past, others seem to be condemned to repeat it. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie pośle. Jeszcze raz przypominam o regule
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind everyone to stick to the time limits. The next speaker is Mr. Hetman for 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the EU as a community has learned a lot from this pandemic. The beginnings were very difficult. The grave situation, the speed at which the pandemic spread has been a surprise to all of us. However, we started acting together quickly. We have introduced extraordinary measures under very difficult circumstances, and at a very high speed we decided about maximum budget flexibility and granting support to member states. So we do have many instruments at our disposal that are already working. However, we cannot deal with actually overcoming the crisis yet because the pandemic is still ongoing. All of Europe is facing the second wave now. We have observed more and more restrictions being introduced everywhere. That is why we should now more than ever stick to the principle of cooperation. The EU should direct its support to where it is most necessary, because not everyone, not every social group is facing the same challenges. Like many crises, also this bears a huge risk of widening gaps that already exist. We must not leave anyone behind. It is very important to support companies, especially small and medium enterprises, so that we protect our jobs. We should also introduce long-term investments, for example, into modern technologies that will help the EU getting back to economic growth. It is also very important to keep in mind the social aspects, like, for example, systemic strengthening of care for the elderly, who are especially at risk. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Madam Durafrandis for 1 minute and a half.
Thank you. My message is as follows. We're not going to achieve a genuine recovery and a sustainable Europe without measures that are tailored to the tragic situation that we're currently living through. Measures that tackle the consequences, which are not only economic but also social. We need to invest in permanent recovery funds and measures. We need indicators within the European semester which ensures investment in well-being and social systems. We need to ensure that we get a social pillar. We need a recovery fund which is ambitious as part of the MFF. It needs social objectives as well as economic growth, and in that way we can achieve a genuinely sustainable Europe which invests in people. The COVID crisis is affecting our health, our living conditions, and above all our jobs. Therefore, we need a commitment from all social players and businesses so that they ensure that jobs are maintained as a counterparty to the assistance they're receiving. We also want to avoid relocations, which lead to massive job losses. The idea is very simple. We need a sustainable Europe which ensures investment in public services, well-being and the rule of law, and our social systems are things that underpin our European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Monica Semedo for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Vice President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. Looking around us, the room is mainly empty. We can see that the pandemic is far from over. In fact, it's gaining strength. While we are anxiously waiting for a vaccine, the situation for citizens and businesses becomes more and more serious. Youth unemployment has soared. Businesses are struggling. Many won't be able to survive the second wave. And the most deprived need our help more than ever. A recent survey in Luxembourg found that almost 60% of people who needed help were below the age of 40, and 39% were single parents. This House passed a resolution in April which addressed these problems. We must live up that resolution. We need to maintain jobs, provide liquidity to enterprises, especially for SMEs. We need to help the most deprived. We must support all of them and provide help quickly. The European Parliament is standing up for citizens, but Council, Commission, you hold the power to act. You must step up and show how strong our union can be. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo, pani poseł. Głos zabierze pan.
Thank you very much. And now Paulo Borchia for 1 minute.
Sí.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. Let's be honest here. On the 11th of March, the WHO said there was a pandemic, and after 7 months, we still have too few tangible results compared to expectations. The Council of April said, fine, money, the Shore programme, but maybe because the conditions weren't too advantageous, not all of the money was taken up. Then, as well, in the Eurogroup and in the European Council, there were problems, and newspapers said that the Madrid government wasn't planning to use the loan portion of the recovery fund, which may seem very strange, but we have tried to explain here that there would be problems with this instrument. The European Union, when you have priorities imposed from the Brussels on the territories top down, this is the result.
Thank you very much. Now Mr. Cuff.
Thank you. Here in Ireland, we're entering 6 weeks of level 5 restrictions, the highest level of restrictions that we have. It's a difficult time for so many in the midst of this global health crisis. We've already seen substantial job losses, particularly in the aviation industry, but also in retail, hospitality and tourism. We've seen this crisis have a huge impact on young people, on older people, on carers and on everyone's mental health. Many people have had to transition, particularly the young, those in education, from learning in schools and universities to listening to online studies at one point or even now during the pandemic. But we can't let this crisis go to waste. We need to ramp up public investment, and we need to help ensure people's livelihoods are protected and fund a transition towards a fairer and greener socio-economic model in recovery. We cannot respond to the crisis by returning to business as usual.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Goiking, 1 minute.
Herzlichen Dank. Thank you very much. I think one thing's clear: the basic sufferers are the families in every country. It's up to we have to strengthen families, and that's why I said earlier we have to have the child guarantee, because we have to raise millions of children and take them out of poverty. I think that is the best policy. The children need this, and the families need this, and they will increase productivity if they have this money, and that'll create new jobs. So that's why we have to give the money directly to our citizens, and that's an economic policy, it's a social policy, and our colleague isn't here. I will answer to him, because we have to have a humane policy in contrast to what you're doing, and we have to have the people in the focus of our policy. And we are humane social Europe. We're in favor of people. We don't have ice-cold policy. We have a modern policy. That was just what I wished to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker is Mr. Potenga for 1 minute and a half.
Dank u wel, meneer de commissaris. Als een poetshulp straks in quarantaine.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, when people go into quarantine, they risk losing their jobs or part of their salary. If you go into quarantine, it's not a problem for you. This is a class virus, and working class people are more affected by the virus than millionaires. Working class people can't simply retire to their second homes. They need to keep their jobs, they're risking their salaries, they're risking unemployment, whereas the elite simply take in dividends. That's the reality. What's the role of the European Union? It's providing billions to large multinationals, businesses which should be paying taxes properly or stop paying dividends, for example. But they're not doing any of that. And in spite of that, the man in the street is still struggling and being harmed by this. What's the logic of this decision? Why are we using public money and injecting it into private businesses? Let's do the opposite. Let's get the wealthiest, the millionaires and businesses, to invest in public services so that everyone benefits. I think that would be a much more positive solution for our society.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Lenners for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, the pandemic essentially is a health crisis with enormous socio-economic results. And of course, quite a lot has been said already, but I want to mention a very specific point. This is something that we all are concerned about. 5 months ago, we were worried about the companies which were so heavily impacted by this. These are companies in the Netherlands who have to pay their social contributions, they have to pay their taxes. However, if you live in a neighboring country, for example in Germany, then you don't receive any money. And I hope 5 months later this situation has been solved for people. And we heard that these rules on support can't be exported. But I think it's quite logical that these enterprises have to look at Europe, and the only reason they're not getting support is because they have the free right of establishment, which is enshrined in the treaty. And we have to take action. The European Commission had said that the Netherlands was incorrect in this matter, that the Netherlands have to help these people. However, now we have to have a change here. Nothing has changed. These people still are out in the rain, as it were. And again, I've complained to the European Commission. And dear Commission, I would like to encourage you, take a look at these complaints that have been lodged. Look at what's happened to these enterprises and try to find a solution for them to help these people.
And now, Mr. Fernandez, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that we have to recognise that we are facing, first and foremost, a health crisis where economic policy really can only put sticking plasters on this major recession, and until we have a proper cure, until we can dissipate the fear and uncertainty that's affecting our society in the health field, it's going to be difficult to think about a different economic policy that will cover the costs and the investment for the public sector. And I think it's important we shore up an expansive fiscal policy, and hopefully Next Generation EU will do that, and the same for monetary policy, because inflation continues to be negative in the Eurozone and we're a long way from our goal of 2%. So there is a margin for having a better monetary and fiscal policy. And when the health crisis starts to ebb away, when we have more certainty about the future, ASAP, we have to show this will leave will leave terrible scars on our society, particularly young people suffering two crises in a decade. And that is where we should be constructing, we should be financing, we should be providing future to the pillar of social rights, which needs a great deal of support and clear commitment from the institutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Madame Pirbakas for 1 minute.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, President. Today I'll be raising the situation in the 5 overseas departments of France. I want to see an economic recovery plan launched for these overseas territories. I'm from Guadeloupe, and I can tell you that the fact that we're an island and the fact that we're far away from mainland Europe causes us even more problems with regard to the COVID crisis. Fishing, handicrafts and other sectors need to be protected under Article 349 TEU because they're very badly affected. In addition, the Globalisation Adjustment Fund should be used. Our hospitality sector also lacks funds. POSEI funds are being cut as well. And all these elements need to be tackled immediately. Colleagues, it's time for all assistance to overseas regions to be maintained. Our 5 overseas departments need to be helped so that their economies can be relaunched. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, pani poseł.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Peksa for 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, the pandemic has proven 2 things. Most importantly, it shows us how much we are interconnected and depend on each other. If we suffer or prosper, we are in it together. However, it also showed us how disorganized and weak are we in the face of new challenges. Member states closing borders without coordination, applying different travel conditions, providing contradictory information, and competing for supplies among themselves look like complete farce, a dangerous farce with human lives at hand. We need a coordinated European response, we need stronger rule of law conditionalities, and we need to move the health competencies from national to Central European level with the backing of a stronger European Centre for Disease and Prevention Control. Only by acting together we will overcome this pandemic. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Fidanza for 1 minute.
Grazie.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. We're fully in the second wave of COVID. It was predictable, but many member states seem to find themselves unprepared. It's true the Union is working on a vaccine. We have travel restrictions. We should really be trying to avoid an impasse on the health level and to deal with our health system, even if it is imperfect. And yet we're working on an economic recovery at a point in time when new restrictions are being introduced will seriously affect productive sections. The frugal four are using the rule of law to block a plan which they never really wanted. And recently we've heard the news that some countries, thanks to negative growth rates, prefer to finance themselves through national bonds rather than the loans of the Recovery Fund, which further reduces the overall effect of the plan. Now, this means that we do need to ensure negotiations continue because we need transfers immediately to support our companies now before it's too late. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie pośle.
Thank you very much. And now Vladimir Bilčík for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dear members, thank you very much for giving me this floor. Almost everyone knows someone who suffered from this pandemic, whose life has been changed. Let me assure you that our main interest is to help those where we can help. We're also very happy that every day I see examples of resilience and hope. For example, in the healthcare or the delivery service and the public administration. So thank you very much. In a crisis such as this, we have to join forces and find solutions that bring us together and that don't divide us as a society. And that's why during the pandemic we need responsible politicians who can see into the future, who are looking beyond the next couple of days or weeks, and who are looking at borders as not just something that has to do with holidays, but Schengen is freedom for us. It's our prosperity. We have to protect it and just allow and praise those who have deserved it. Countries have had quite a lot of trouble using the recovery funds, but this is a new situation. That's why we need a European solution. It's in our interests. We've never had a crisis like this, and it's important to solve it together. And so that's why I thank you and express my admiration of the institutions which have acted so rapidly and provided help. We need money in the area of research, development, and we need a European Union that helps us with public health. This is the right way to go. This is the way that saves lives. We will only survive this crisis by working together and being honest in our communications. This crisis can only be overcome when we base ourselves on facts and evidence. That's how we create conditions for the future. And this should come from Brussels and it should be coming in the...
Thank you very much. And now Gabriele Bischoff for 1.5 minutes.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you, President. We can see also from what's been said that this is one of the worst crises that the European has been through. And I think the worst is yet to come, unfortunately. There is increasing fear of poverty and marginalisation. People are feeling more insecure. The COVID crisis is causing and intensifying poverty, and we need solidarity-based solutions such as SURE, as the Commissioner said. But there are some people who are more affected than others. Artists, the self-employed, and in particular young people, for example. We all know how important adolescence is for the rest of a person's life, and we're seeing young people with many problems. In addition, they're being blamed for increasing infection rates. We need to provide them with genuine perspectives, and that's got to go further than just the youth guarantee. We are facing a wave of restructurings in Europe. Businesses are using the crisis to do away with jobs. Employees need to have information available. We need strong rules on all of this, and we need to act to ensure that the rights that democracies have achieved in the workplace are genuinely adhered to. We need to do more than the Commission has so far stated in its work programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Joachim Kuss. 1 minute.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, if I may, I'm going to point out a fundamental fact. Of course, we're afraid of these figures. These are the number of people who've tested positive for coronavirus. And because this number is increasing for whatever reason, correctly or incorrectly, we're having all kinds of restrictions on our freedom. And it doesn't seem that anyone's asking as whether the impact of these actions aren't actually worse. We are fearing these numbers, but we should be fearing God, as we see in the Bible. Don't fear that which would harm you, but only fear rather things that could lead to your destruction. So now we're afraid of a virus, and we should only be fearing God. And so we have to stop trying to act as though we're going to rescue people, but we should encourage people instead.
Thank you very much. And now, Melbarde, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak from the shoes of Culture Committee. Since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, much energy has been paid to the EU economies and labour markets as a whole, but often not to the specific sectors and workers. Culture and creative, as well as media sectors, have been hit particularly hard with dramatic income losses and high rise of unemployment. Meanwhile, support to these sectors has been inadequate both at national and EU level. Culture and media cannot simply be bailed out or resurrected after failure like other industries. It is deplorable that during these times when media and culture is consumed more than ever, many of these organisations are struggling for survival. That is why I reiterate the calls for a 2% earmarking of the Recovery and Resilience Facility to culture and creative sectors and media. I strongly believe that strong news media and well-financed culture must be at the heart of our democracies and the bedrock of the EU's recovery.
Thank you very much. And now Željana Zovko, 1.5 minutes.
Madam President, dear Commissioner, welcome. After lockdown in the spring, many activities were put on hold. Companies lost their income and people lost their jobs. Actions are required, especially now. We see that many member states are in a second lockdown and that it's being initiated. All these socio-economic measures you talked about depend on a balance of competences on national and European level. I call the Commission to increase its active monitoring and guidance. I ask the Council to uphold solidarity and the Europe-wide coordination. Borders should stay open. Internal markets should remain active. Health risks should be tackled together. Special attention should also go to those that are the hardest hit: research, health, cultural sector, tourism and small and medium enterprises in general. Croatian government announced additional measures to improve support for micro-entrepreneurs, as together with small and medium enterprises they form the backbone of our economy. Safeguarding jobs, guaranteeing income, and on top of that, developing actions to limit the spread of virus. This crisis requires a lot from us. Only with a genuine European approach we can ensure social and economic recovery. We are in this together. No one can save themselves for itself. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, pani poseł. Głos zabierze pan poseł.
Thank you very much. And now left there is Christoforu. 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I believe, dear Chair, that the Recovery Fund is something that was needed in order to support the economies of the Member States cope with this unprecedented pandemic. However, I think that everybody agrees that this fund was decided upon under different conditions when the pandemic was still at its beginning and no one could imagine the huge impact that it would have and the depth of the pandemic. So I think we need to revisit this under the light of the most recent data. On the one hand, this fund could lead the recovery of the member states, but we need today another fund that we could call the Social Recovery Fund that will immediately pump money into the market for the unemployed, because the unemployment funds in all of the countries are running out, for businesses, for the pensioners, for society at large. This is very important because the recovery fund, which is 1.4 trillion, will be late in bringing money into the market. I come from a country that is dependent to a large degree on tourism, Cyprus. I mean, if we do not have immediate support on the tourism sector, we may have tourism, but we will have no tourist businesses because they will go bust right now. So we need to have this social recovery fund in order to stave off the bankruptcy of our countries. Thank you.
Panie pośle, przepraszam I proszę.
Thank you very much. I apologize to Evelyn Regner and I give her the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Europäische Maßnahmen zum Abfedern.
European measures to mitigate the COVID crisis need to deal with employees and look after young people and women. The wealthy are doing fine. We need to make sure that funding reaches businesses that need it. Now, why am I saying that? For example, MAN, an Austrian business, has been getting a lot of support and EU money to restructure, but now 2,000 employees have lost their jobs. I don't think that looks particularly like solidarity-based reconstruction. 2,000 people have lost their jobs. Many of them are women. I would say that they are the heroes of our crisis, but they're not being supported. We need to invest in quality jobs. That would be a way of dealing with this kind of situation. Social infrastructure, high quality care, care for children and babies. If only 2% of national GDP went into quality jobs, we could create 1.5 million jobs. So we need to invest in this quality care. We need to invest in the future, a well-being economy for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Carlo Ressler for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Global pandemic and a crisis without precedent have opened deep wounds for entire Europe and especially for the most vulnerable groups. Social and economic consequences are again mostly felt by the youth. Recently they were also hard struck by the financial crisis. Mass unemployment meant for million people, especially the youth who are not from the Western or Northern Europe, meant marginalization, low income, harder circumstances in founding families, and crisis is something that hits all generations, but the youth in their formative years feel the consequences harder and longer. This fall and winter, the priority needs to be the protection of human lives and the health of most vulnerable groups. Each life matters and is precious. Intergenerational solidarity today means the protection of those who are most vulnerable. In health terms, these are the elderly. In social and economic terms, due to the crisis, these are the youth. This is why we need a strong employment policy, and this is why we must not let the youth to lose years, dreams, and us to lose new generations in Europe. Thank you.
Bardzo krótka przerwa na dezynfekcję stanowiska w
We will have a very short break, and now I give the floor to Sunčana Glavak.
Hvala lijepa, srdačan pozdrav iz Zagreba još.
Thank you. In our struggle in fighting the pandemic of the corona crisis, in the past few months, both on the European and national levels, we have made an exceptional package of measures for the resurrection of Europe. The billions of euros are going into health systems and medical supplies, so solidarity has been clearly shown. On the level of the Republic of Croatia, our government has also acted swiftly and efficiently in order to support the private sector, workers and employers, with the aim of preserving workplaces. Owing to the financial help of the EU and the active engagement of the Croatian government, Croatia, compared to February of this year, has over 3,000 new employed people. Also, we're actively working on mitigating the pandemic effects with the huge support of European funds. We have had new measures for self-employed and unemployed persons, and we expect that 47 million euros will be put at their disposal. This pandemic is a huge challenge, but also an opportunity for a transformation and reduction of differences in social and economic terms. We need to keep in mind the priorities of member states and create a strong network with a common interest. We are facing times of chess moves and need to keep at least 2 moves up our sleeve. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję pani.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Commission, the floor now goes to Commissioner Gentiloni. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I think in this debate it came very clear how deep the crisis we are facing is, and also the fact that new measures, new restrictions that are taken in these weeks in our member states could further challenge the recovery. So this is my first point. The crisis is not behind us, because this crisis is not like a war that finishes at a certain point, and with the end of the war, the reconstruction begins. In this case, we will have a certain amount of time where emergency policies and recovery policy will go hand in hand. I think the awareness in the Parliament on the importance of the common reaction is very strong. I have to say that this common reaction came first of all from a sentiment of solidarity, which is a very good and European sentiment, but also it came from a common interest, the common interest to preserve the single market, because all we are seeing now shows that our concern on the fact that this crisis could have uneven consequences among different sectors and member states are quite confirmed. So we are seeing that distances are there. And this common interest, again, is not behind us. And this is one of the reasons why we should continue to support with our fiscal policies the recovery in the next period. I think that several interventions were mentioning the need of having the best possible use of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. What the Commission is committed to is to find a right balance, because this is not a memorandum written in Brussels that we have to impose to member states. These will be proposals coming from member states, and the Commission will work to make sure that these proposals are coherent with our common priorities and with country-specific recommendations, and not only linked to tactical or short-term goals. But I repeat, the starting point will be national decisions, national governments, national parliaments. Several honourable members rightly say that we need a stronger coordination. But we all know, and you know better than me, that it's always necessary to find the right balance between the demand for a stronger coordination and the demand to preserve national role. We are not a federal state. this could be a good thing or a bad thing according to political and cultural point of views, but the fact is that we are not. And so we have some sectors and some areas where the coordination is easier and other areas where it is more difficult. I think in this occasion we should go further in coordination, especially on healthcare, safety measures, borders coordination, and all this situation of travel, which is really very, very difficult among member states. But of course, this is an effort that the Commission can easily do if member states will allow us. And I appreciate the fact that I understand the Parliament is strongly advocating for this stronger coordination. Several honourable members took the floor on social issues, our social model. I think that overall our social model showed in this crisis its difficulties, but also its strength. I think we can be proud of our social model if we compare the social consequences of this crisis in other parts of the world, where we don't have social services, or even where we have authoritarian models in government. The European social model confirmed, from my point of view, its strength, but of course we have to reinforce it. We have to confirm the commitment to have the social pillar crucial in our semester. We have to be aware that the crisis is increasing social inequalities and that we have winners and losers. We have winners of this crisis, not only rich persons generally, but also sectors of our global economy. For example, the digital global platforms are winners of this crisis. We will speak about this when we will speak about the digital taxation, own resources, etc., but for sure they are winners of this crisis. And other sectors that were mentioned here, culture, entertainment, travel, tourism, SMEs, and for sure I'm forgetting something, are the losers of this crisis. This means that they will need support for a longer time than others. We can't change and phase out this support in these sectors too soon. Finally, I think that there is a large consensus on the fact that our goal, the goal of this unprecedented common response, is not only to re-give life to our economies, to go back to what we were at the end of 2019. We are all aware of the difficulties, and some of them were mentioned here. The climate transition is not easy in many countries, but we are also aware of the tremendous responsibility that we have during this crisis to seize the opportunity to change for the better our societies and our economies. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję. Zamykam debatę. Zanim
Thank you very much.
Debat, czyli realizacji porządku dziennego, zostawię miejsce przewodniczącemu na wygłoszenie komunikatu.
Thank you.
Sì, care colleghe e cari colleghi.
Colleagues, a few announcements. I would like to inform you that I have decided to inflict a penalty on Vili Borsincic with a loss of a per diem for a 2-day period. Temporary suspension as of the 22nd of October for 7 consecutive days from meeting in the European Parliament, in any of his bodies, committees or delegations, and the participation in any or all of the activities of Parliament, as well as a ban on representing the Parliament in an interparliamentary delegation, interparliamentary conference, or any interinstitutional body for the period of a month. For having, in fact, taken some of his gloves off and having been inappropriate on 16th of September last. That decision has been notified to the member in question, and Mr. Sinčić now has 2 weeks to appeal against the decision that has been communicated to him to the Bureau. And I'd also like to inform you that I have decided to inflict a penalty on Ioannis Lagos, whereby he loses his right to a per diem for a period of 7 days, as well as his temporary suspension as of the 22nd of October last for a period of 4 consecutive days from meetings of the Parliament and any of its bodies, committees or delegations, and participation in any or all of the activities of the Parliament for having disturbed by using injudicious language the sitting on the 17th of September of 2020. This decision has been notified to the member concerned today, and under Rule 177, Mr. Lagos has 2 weeks to present an internal appeal against this decision to the Bureau. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your cooperation. I would wish your work every success.
We will now proceed to the debates. Our next item on the agenda is the report by Mrs. Dora Burkhardt on deforestation. I'd like to inform members that for all the debates in this part session, there will be no catch-the-eye procedure, no blue cards, and no points of order will be accepted. Furthermore, there are remote interventions from Parliament's liaison offices in the Member States foreseen. Now I will give the floor to our rapporteur, Mrs. Delara Burkhardt. 6 minutes.
Vielen Dank, liebe Kolleginnen.
Thank you, colleagues. I am joining you for this important debate from Berlin, because we're in a situation which affects our daily lives. Morning coffee, sitting in the car, many of the things we do in our daily lives are a problem for our forests, and we are part of the problem. Forests are being burnt down or logged to make place for to grow goods that we want, raw materials such as palm oil, for example, and this all soy or beef, for example. This is a major contribution to our commerce. We can't have all these kinds of goods coming from areas such as the Amazon, in which forests have been changed to other use. What about the steaks that we enjoy barbecuing? They often come from areas where forests have been burnt down. Many of those who sell beef buy it from Brazilian businesses who burn down Amazon rainforests, in spite of the fact that they've committed not to log forests. A well-known German car maker gets the leather for its car seats, buys from an Italian producer, which in turn buys it from Latin America, from unscrupulous businesses that are involved in logging. For example, in Paraguay, every 2 minutes an area the size of a football field was destroyed in Paraguay in 2019, and that's just one example of many. In 2019, primary rainforest was lost on the earth from the DRC, Indonesia, Brazil, etc., and the amount lost was the size of Belgium. No one should have to go to the supermarket and decide whether they want to buy products that damage rainforests or not. But currently there are no European rules that stop these products being sold in supermarkets. In the European Parliament, we have been preparing for the future by preparing a report which we'll be voting on this week with regard to deforestation. If a business wants to bring a product into Europe from elsewhere in the world, they need to make sure that it's been sourced from a partner that is not involved in logging rainforests or other destruction of natural habitats. Because the problem with deforestation, for example, is that it reduces biodiversity and also contributes to climate change. But it's also a social problem because the logging of forests often contributes to human rights violations. So European importers need to ensure that any product they import does not come from an area where human rights are violated. European businesses need to be liable under civil law for any damages caused. The businesses need to carry out their due diligence appropriately, because if we don't, but it needs to be binding, because otherwise it's simply a statement of intent without achieving anything. We don't want to see activities that destroy nature and violate human rights. I think that trade can become better if we have stricter European standards. We need to have a Green Deal that is not only within Europe but is responsible across the world. Many people believe that goods should be produced in an appropriate manner without destroying our planet. With this legislative framework, I think we can ensure fairer competition as well, because at the moment there are businesses that make a profit by destroying our environment. The European Parliament has this opportunity to put pressure on and provide an ambitious proposal to the Commission. Ursula von der Leyen said that she would take proposals from the Parliament seriously and propose legislation relating to them. We should recall that here in the Parliament and provide the Commissioner with a decent proposal so that there's no bitter taste when we drink our coffee or our hot chocolate. We in Europe want to play a leading role in nature protection and in preventing deforestation and supporting human rights. Please support the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Rapporteur. Now I give the floor to our next speaker, Mrs. Karlsbro, who speaks for the Committee on International Trade. 2 minutes, please.
Herr talman.
Chair, the forest is whispering about our ancestors. When I go through my forest at home, I can see generations of the work of generations. And this is what a friend of mine said when I asked, what does a forest mean to you? I come from a country where half of the country is a forest. It's our resource for the future. It creates growth. And generations of forest owners have ensured sustainability before this became an international term. And these are also the lungs of the world. And this is provides biodiversity. It provides a place for us to enjoy calm and meditation. So this is absolutely essential for rescuing the climate. But at the same time, warmer climates threaten the forest. And of course, deforestation is a global problem. It threatens the climate, it threatens species, but it also threatens long-term economic growth. Illegal deforestation isn't just an environment problem. It creates poverty, and it also creates a risk for corruption. So working together for sustainable trade is very important, and we have to do this together with the business sector, and we have to do this with the civil society as well. The framework, FLECT, which promotes sustainable forestry, is one link in this chain. That's why we have to develop and strengthen this cooperation. We have to make it easier for countries and enterprises and foresters to use forestry products in a sustainable way. That benefits us, that benefits everyone, and it benefits the generations in the future. A strong European cooperation against deforestation is something we need to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Commissioner Sinkevičius.
Thank you. Honourable members, let me start by thanking this Parliament for its valuable work and for its continuous support to address what has become one of the main threats to our planet, global deforestation. And let me congratulate you, Ms. Burkhardt, and the entire Environment Committee on your important report, which calls for an EU legal framework to halt and reverse EU-driven global deforestation. It is good to see that we agree on the importance of this subject and that we share the sense of urgency. Our EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 stresses the importance of increasing the quantity, quality and resilience of our own forests. But while the area covered by forests in Europe increases, forest degradation and international